And so this is when elections were created for the Social Democrats, also when Rui Rio appeared as a candidate. Along with Rui Rio, Pedro Santana Lopes. Pedro Santana Lopes had been the leader of the Social Democrats in the past, and he was actually prime minister for a few months, but I already talked about this, but Jorge Sampaio, a socialist president, decided to fire him on the basis of nothing. Essentially, that was the reason that Jorge Sampaio fired Pedro Santana Lopes' government. He had no reason, he gave no reason to do it. Except, he gave one reason. He said that he didn't like Pedro Santana Lopes. That's the type of decision-making process in the head of a socialist. Is he doesn't like someone, so he's going to use the power that he has to make that person disappear, essentially. And that cost us a lot, because that decision brought José Sócrates to the position of prime minister, and José Sócrates as prime minister brought us the third bankruptcy of Portugal in 45 years. But anyway, the elections in the Social Democrats were underway. When the time came to vote, Rui Rio was elected, Pedro Santana Lopes lost, and actually he lost while still being a member of the Social Democrats, but due to what has been happening to Rui Rio in the following months and years as he became the president, the leader of the Social Democrats, Pedro Santana Lopes actually left the Social Democrats and formed his own party called Aliança. I'll probably talk about that party later on, but they do not have parliament representation. They are a completely new party. In the end, they aren't very different than the Social Democrats, but I'll get to that. Anyway, Rui Rio was elected, and everyone seemed to be happy because, again, Rui Rio had created that image for himself, that perception where he is considered to be a strong leader, someone that fights lobbies, that fights interests, and that isn't really worried about having the spotlight on him. This part is true. The part where he doesn't want the spotlight on him. That part continues to be exactly the same as when he was mayor in Porto. Everything else, however, is not. For some reason, Rui Rio has become the typical politician after he became the leader of the Social Democrats. He became the typical politician. He is the leader of the biggest party in parliament and the biggest opposition to the government, but he has never done any sort of opposition to the government. In fact, we have seen him doing certain meetings with António Costa, which brought rumors that the Central Bloc was coming back. And the Central Bloc in Portugal was essentially a sort of verbal deal between the socialists and the Social Democrats that happened a few times in the past. So the deal would be that the Social Democrats would vote for, or not vote at all, for certain laws that the socialists wanted to pass. And vice versa, when the Social Democrats were in power and they wanted to pass certain laws, then the socialists would vote favorably or not vote at all so that the law would pass in parliament. This was the Central Bloc, and it happened a few times when socialists were in government or when the Social Democrats were in government, which is rare. The Social Democrats have not been in government as many times as the socialists, but still they would make these sort of verbal deals. I'm sure they weren't just verbal, but the Central Bloc was essentially one party allowing the other to govern when they had a relative majority in parliament. They won the elections, but not with the majority in parliament. That's the relative majority in parliament, which means that they needed the support of other parties to pass certain laws, and so the Central Bloc was born in that sense. They would vote favorably for each other just so that things could actually be done. And the idea of the Central Bloc appearing again, because that was pretty much destroyed ever since, well, actually from the 2000s, the start of the 2000s, and specifically after Jorge Sampaio fired Santana Lopes as government. Things got really, really bad in terms of inter-party relations. Because the socialists in the past, they were more like the Social Democrats. They were kind of center-left. But in recent years, things got much worse because the socialists started to be much closer to the far left than to the center-left. The relations between parties got worse, and the central bloc was supposedly not going to happen many times again, if ever. But with Rui Rio, it seems to be coming back. He has done many meetings with António Costa. They seem to have voted favorably for certain laws that favor the party's interests, Social Democrats and Socialists. And they seem to be agreeing also on certain things in terms of health, in terms of education, which is quite weird because Portugal needs to get away from having socialist policies being shoved down our throats again, because that is exactly what brought us our most recent bankruptcy. In the past, first and second bankruptcies, socialists also had their hands in them, but at least we had our own currency. Now we don't have that. We have the euro, and we cannot do anything to that currency because we do not control it ourselves as we did our own. So going through bankruptcy is much, much harder, as we saw in 2011. And so we don't need more socialism. We need less or none at all in Portugal. Yet, Rui Rio seems to be doing everything to get some sort of jobs in government in the next elections, meaning that they are making some sort of deal. The polls show that the socialists will most likely win, not with a majority, and they will need to make a coalition with someone to have the majority in parliament. And Rui Rio seems to be fine in accepting that sort of future for this country. It seems that he just wants to make sure that the Social Democrats get some sort of position in government as compensation for helping the socialists pass the laws that they want to pass. And that is a complete betrayal of everything that everyone that voted for Social Democrats in 2015 is a betrayal of everyone that did that, because Rui Rio is doing exactly what the socialists want. His opposition to the government since he became the leader of the Social Democrats is quite pitiful. He appeared a couple of times talking about the lies of the government, but that's pretty much it. The Social Democrats have been a complete zero in terms of opposition to the government. And the fact that Rui Rio is doing all these meetings with António Costa and apparently agreeing with many of the socialist measures is insane for someone that actually won the elections in 2015. Everyone that voted for them, well, not everyone, of course, but a large chunk of that group that voted for them in 2015 is not happy with what Rui Rio is doing. And in fact, Rui Rio went as far as agreeing with another far-left tax raise. The far-leftists they want another tax raise. And Rui Rio actually agreed with them, which was insane. Rui Rio is also, or the Social Democrats with Rui Rio as leader, they are also agreeing with giving the Portuguese teachers, they are demanding to have all the money that they, since José Sócrates, that certain cuts in public services, and namely education, were done. And the teachers are now demanding to retroactively receive the money that they were cut, which means that they want to receive 9 years, I think 4 months and 2 days in back pay, let's say. And this is a huge amount of money that will be permanent if they actually do this. It will be permanent, and we are already in the same state or even worse than we were in 2011 when we were in bankruptcy, basically. And Rui Rio is agreeing with this. This is absolutely insane. They seem to be doing everything to get votes. They are no longer the balanced version of socialism, let's say. They are as radical as the socialists and the far left are. Because the far left demands for the same thing. They want the teachers to get all the money at the expense of the taxpayers. And that will mean more taxes. That will mean that we will need to increase our debt. That will mean that we will have the same exact issues. We already have them, actually. And if they do it now again, we will be even worse than we were before the third bankruptcy. And Rui Rio seems to be fine in accepting this. Right now, and as far as I'm concerned, he destroyed the image or the perception that he was a different politician when he was mayor of Porto. He destroyed that image completely. He is serving the exact same interests. If he was that person when he was mayor of Porto, he is no longer that person. He is being the same type of politician that we have seen since ever. And that is very sad, because we need to have different policies applied in this country, or we will be in the same cycle as we've been for 45 years, which is spend much more than we can, bankruptcy, correct certain things, then go back to spending more than we can, then bankruptcy, and so on and so on and so on. This is the cycle that Portugal has been for 45 years. And we need to have different policies to change that. Otherwise, we will not be able to survive much longer. Rui Rio seems to not be the solution for any of this, because he is doing exactly what the socialists want. He is doing exactly what the far left want. Anyway, I think that's it for now. I hope you like this, and I'll see you next time.